What's up, everybody? Today I decided to do something a little bit different. I decided to do a discussion video talking a little bit about my history with Goosebumps and then the Goosebumps books that I've changed opinions on a little bit over the years. Back when I first started getting into collecting Goosebumps and reading them again a few years ago, I bought an entire set of the original 62 series. I read through the whole series and my opinions have changed on quite a few of them. A lot of them, probably the majority, if I'm being honest, have my opinion on them has probably stayed the same or similar. But there's been quite a few that, from what I remember as a kid, my thoughts have changed on them quite a bit. There's several books that I remember not liking at all, and now I love them, and vice versa. There's quite a few books that I liked as a kid, and now I don't really care for them as much. They lived on better in memory. So yeah, I wanted to just talk a little bit about kind of my history with Goosebumps, how I grew up with them, what some of my first books were in the series. One of the first ones I want to talk about is A Night in Terror Tower. Now, this is in contest as one of my first Goosebumps book with another one. My memory's a little bit vague. My memory with this one is even more vague, so I have the sneaking suspicion that this may have been my first. However, I do somewhat remember, I think my mom getting this book for me. Not this exact copy, a different copy, probably one of the 2003 reprints. And I think I remember starting to read it when I was a kid. I was probably a very young age. I couldn't even tell you for sure. And I don't know if I ever finished it. Like I said, it's a very vague memory, and I think I ended up giving the book away to one of my friends. For some reason, that just didn't click with me at the time. Like I said, I was probably pretty young, and I just don't remember a whole lot about it. I don't even think I finished or read the whole book. I ended up giving it to one of my friends or something. So I think this, technically, I don't know if, I guess I would say it was my first Goosebumps book. It was one of my first, but I didn't really read the whole things from what I remember, so yeah, I don't know. But eventually I would go back later on once I got into Goosebumps more as a kid and finish reading this, and I remember really liking it. Now as an adult, I think it's just kind of okay. It's a decent Goosebumps book. It's a little bit repetitive with all of the chase scenes. Pretty much the whole back half of this book is the two kids running away from this guy on the cover. It's just a lot of chase scenes, them running and hiding from this guy. And then there's some really weird logic at the end. There's a big twist of who the main characters are and the role they play in the story. And I kind of like the twist, but there's some really wonky logic behind it and involving some like sorcery and some supernatural stuff. Just doesn't really make a lot of sense. So yeah, back when I was a kid, I would probably have given this like a 4 out of 5 stars. Nowadays, it's probably like a 3-star book, maybe a 3.5. It's just a decent Goosebumps book in my opinion. So yeah, and that was another thing too I wanted to talk about a little bit is obviously when I was a kid, my critical thinking skills weren't quite as developed as they are now. I never really rated Goosebumps books when I was a kid or anything like that. I never really had anyone to talk to about Goosebumps that much. My younger brother, he was a little bit of a reader, not as big of a reader as I was. He was more of like a casual Goosebumps fan. So he would read some of the books, and we would discuss them a little bit with each other. But beyond that, I never really had anyone to talk about Goosebumps books with when I was a kid. I was a very shy kid. I didn't really have a lot of friends. So yeah, I was just kind of like on my own. I just knew which ones I liked and which ones I didn't like. I didn't really write reviews for them or rate them or anything like that. But yeah, this was definitely one of my first Goosebumps books. And it's one that I still like, but I don't think it's quite as good as I used to think it was. So yeah, Night in Terror Tower, that's the first one I want to talk about. And then the other one I mentioned that's kind of in contest with that, this one I guess technically could be my very first Goosebumps book I ever read, Diary of a Mad Mummy. This is book number 10 from the Give Yourself Goosebumps series. And I think this is the very first Goosebumps book that I read all the way through, every single ending. And I remember this one a lot more than A Night in Terror Tower because I remember my mom buying this for me or picking it up for me at a garage sale for super cheap. And this isn't the exact copy, unfortunately. The other copy I had was like super, super beat up. I think I ended up throwing it away. Like it was just trashed. It was in horrible shape. Like it was pretty much fallen apart. I think I just ended up tossing it. I'm kind of mad at myself. I kind of wished I would have kept it just for the, I don't know, sentimental value, I guess. But yeah. So I think this is officially like my first Goosebumps book ever. And I remember reading this endlessly when I was a kid. I think I probably got this a short while after A Night in Terror Tower. I might have been a year or two older. I don't really remember for sure. And yeah, I read this book compulsively over and over again, every single ending. It was the only Goosebumps book I had, so I just kept reading it over and over again, and I loved it. I thought it was like the best thing I'd ever read in my life. I was obsessed with it. um, Unfortunately, it's one that it's kind of hard for me to look at objectively now as an adult. I think I reread this, was it earlier this year or maybe late last year? I can't really remember for sure. But yeah, I reread this not too long ago, and it's kind of hard for me to look at this book objectively. I think this book just exists as like a fond memory, if that makes sense. You know, this book just exists as like pure nostalgia for me, sentimental value. I still like it and just have a lot of love for this book for the reasons I've mentioned, but it's one that I don't really find myself. Um, I don't think I'm going to revisit this book too often or too much because it's so ingrained into my memory, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's Diary of a Mad Mummy. I think it's a good book still, but it's just one that I don't see myself revisiting much at all in the future because it's just so ingrained into my memory, and it's just yeah. But yeah, I'm pretty sure this was my first ever Goosebumps book that I read like all the way through. So yeah, that's Diary of a Mad Mummy. Okay, and while we're on the topic of Give Yourself Goosebumps book, I thought I would bring this one up because I actually just read this pretty recently. This was the last GYG that I read, Your Plant Food. This is book number 30 in the series. And this is one that I did not like all that much. And I remember loving this book when I was younger. This one has a really cool concept to it. You, as the main character, of course, with these GYGs, along with some of your friends, are going on like this class field trip to this botanical gardens. And there's sort of like a gameplay function with this one. You have to visit different areas of the garden, collect different items, and then make it like to the end of like the field trip. And I remember thinking this book was awesome when I was younger. I didn't really remember a lot of details about it or exactly why I thought it was awesome, but I do remember really liking it. And upon reread, it's really not all that great. The game function in this is not the best. This is just not one of the better GYGs in my opinion. This is probably now, I'd probably give this like a 3 out of 5 stars. It's fine. It could have been a lot better. The potential's there, but it just ends up being fine, kind of okay. Sort of a middle of the road GYG. I really like the concept of this one, and there were some fun scenes in here. But yeah, it just didn't really hold up for me. Now, the Give Yourself Goosebumps series as a whole, I find that a lot of the books haven't really held up that well over time. I think part of it is just me getting older and not really being able to get into that mindset. I guess just the imagination and being able to like really get immersed into the stories like I was when I was younger. When I was a kid, the Give Yourself Goosebumps series as a whole was my favorite of the Goosebumps franchise. And I've read every single GYG book. I would go to my local library. I would check out each GYG, read through the entire series, and then I would go back and reread my favorite ones over and over again. And I was just absolutely obsessed with them. I love the fact that I was the main character. It made me feel a part of the story, like I was actually there. Now, as an adult, I feel like I've kind of lost out on that. Excuse me, lost out on the ability to do that a little bit, to kind of like just fall into the story, to kind of lose myself in the story, become so easily immersed in it. And what's weird to me is that hasn't really seemed to happen as much with the mainline Goosebumps books, the original 62 series 2000. Those ones I still seem to enjoy pretty close to the same level, at least. For some reason, though, these GYGs, I just have a harder time getting into them as an adult. I'm still enjoying them. I'm still enjoying reading through this series. But something about it, I just feel like I've lost my love just a little bit for the series. Not a lot, but a little bit over the years. So yeah. A lot of GYGs, honestly, I could have put in the place of this one. There's a lot of them that just are not as good as I remembered, but they're still okay. I just wanted to mention this one since I read it so very recently. And this was okay. It was like a 3 out of 5 star book. But yeah, that's number 30, or Plant Food. Okay, a couple of very classic and very iconic OG 62 books. These are ones that, for whatever reason, I did not like when I was younger. I couldn't tell you why. And once you see what they are, you're probably going to be asking the same question. Why? What was wrong with me as a kid? So the first one is Night of the Living Dummy. I don't think I even need an explanation for this. And this goes for pretty much all of the original Night of the Living Dummy books, not just the first one, 2, 3, even the Series 2000 ones. I don't think I really liked any of them as a kid except number 3. I have a vague memory of enjoying 3 the most out of all of the dummy books when I was younger. I'm not really sure why. I didn't enjoy this one or number 2. I just didn't remember liking them or caring about them at all. I know I read them. I read all the Goosebumps books when I was a kid because I was obsessed with the series. But for whatever reason, I just never cared for this. I don't know. And now I think they're pretty good. This first one isn't the best. It's probably one of the weaker ones out of the original dummy run, if not the weakest one, if I'm being honest. But it's still pretty decent. This is like a 3.5 out of 5 star book. This is a pretty good book. Now I enjoy all of the classic slappy books. Well, this one I guess isn't really a slappy book. But yeah, for whatever reason, I didn't like these as a kid, even though these are super iconic. Obviously, Slappy is like the mascot of Goosebumps now. But yeah, I don't know. And then another one, even more iconic than Night of the Living Dummy, The Haunted Mask. I don't know why. I don't know what was wrong with me as a kid, but I did not like the Haunted Mask books. I could not explain it. And now I absolutely love the very first Haunted Mask book. I think this is one of the best Goosebumps books ever. Is it overrated? Is it a little bit overly talked about and overhyped? Maybe a little bit. You know, even people who are non-Goosebumps fans or who aren't like huge R.L. Stine fans in this sort of like Goosebumps community, they know about this book. Like everyone knows about the Haunted Mask. I do think it does deserve the recognition that it gets, I think, but I don't think it's the very best Goosebumps book. There's some better ones out there. Maybe it is a little bit overhyped. I don't know. But yeah, for some reason when I was a kid, I didn't like this one. I don't know why. Again, I didn't really have many friends growing up. I didn't really have anyone to talk to about this series. There was just something about this book that I guess just never really drew my attention. I don't know what it was. But yeah, I love it now. It's a great book. Definitely in my top 10, probably from the original 62. Not quite in my top 5. Probably in my top 10 from the original 62 series. But yeah, that's The Haunted Mask. Okay. And then there's a lot of books that my opinions on them haven't really changed much. I'm about to show you one. This is also one of my very first Goosebumps books that I ever read. I remember going to a bookstore when I was younger. I don't remember what bookstore, if it was Barnes & Noble or some other bookstore. And my mom let me pick out 2 Goosebumps books, brand new. And they were the 2003 reprints at the time. And I picked out How to Kill a Monster. And then the other one I picked out is this one, Werewolf of Fever Swamp. This exact copy I still have. And I thought I wrote my name somewhere on the inside cover. Maybe it was the other one I did. I don't know. I was about to show you guys, but it's not in this one. Maybe it's in the other one. I wrote my name on the inside of the cover. But yeah, this was also one of my first Goosebumps books. And when I was a kid, this was my all-time favorite Goosebumps book. Above Monster Blood even. Above One Day at Horrorland. Above The Ghost Next Door even. I didn't bring that book with me. I don't think that was one of my top favorites when I was a kid, but I did really enjoy it. And now today as an adult, that is my top favorite. But yeah, this is one my opinion hasn't really changed on. It's still right up there, if not my favorite, like in my top 3. I absolutely love The Werewolf of Fever Swamp. I will admit a large part of it is because of nostalgia. Speaking from a more like objective standpoint, this book isn't quite as good as I make it out to be or as much as I like it, but yeah, this one is kind of like solidified as one of my top favorites, and I don't think that's ever going to change. I think part of that is because it's kind of a dog story at the core of it. And I've always really, really liked dog stories. I grew up with dogs in my household. I'm kind of a dog person a little bit, and it's just that part of the story where this kid, Grady, he finds this stray dog and he names him Wolf, and everyone doesn't like this dog. They don't trust him, but the Grady, the main character, kind of forms like an emotional bond with this dog that he found. I've just always found that kind of like just kind of touching, I guess, and kind of emotional. Something I've always kind of connected with, you know. So I think that's one of the reasons that I like this book as much as I do, and it is kind of just forever solidified as one of my top favorites. And the ending is just kind of like this bittersweet ending where things don't work out exactly for our main character, but his pet dog Wolf kind of like stays by his side no matter what. And yeah, there's just something kind of like bittersweet about that. And I've just always love this book, Werewolf of Fever Swamp. One of my first Goosebumps books, and forever one of my favorites. And that's never going to change. All right. All right, let's talk about a couple of Series 2000 books. So this is one that was probably the scariest Goosebumps book I have ever read, and that is Ghost in the Mirror. And this is the last, I think, the very last Series 2000 book, number 25. And I remember reading this book and it just scaring the living daylights out of me when I was younger. I didn't remember all of the exact fine details going into it when I reread this. Was it last year now or 2 years ago? I don't know. I'm losing track of time. But when I reread this as an adult, somewhat recently, last year, whatever, this book still scared the crap out of me as a grown ass adult, almost 30 years old. Mainly the first half. I would say like the first 40 to 50 pages of this book is some of the darkest and most intense stuff that I've ever seen R.L. Stine write, like ever. And unfortunately, the rest of the book does not follow suit. It does not kind of stay with that dark tone. It gets a little silly in the second half of this book. Things get a little weird, kind of goofy, a little bit more childish, kind of. I don't know how to describe it, but yeah. I didn't remember the second half of this book at all. Like, my memories on this book were pretty vague. I just remember the fact that it scared me when I was younger, and going into it as an adult, it still really creeped me out, and I thought I was in for one of my new all-time favorite Goosebumps books. But unfortunately, the second half of this book just completely falls apart, goes in some really weird directions that I did not care for, and it has one of the stupidest twist endings in all of Goosebumps. Like, it's god awful. So yeah, that's Ghost in the Mirror. This one gets the prize of all Goosebumps book for being the most awesome starting out, and just for being the absolutely most disappointing thing in the world in like the last 40 to 50 pages of the book. So yeah, again, I didn't really remember it all that much to be able to say whether my thoughts changed on it a lot over time. But yeah, that's Ghost in the Mirror. And then the other Series 2000 book I wanted to talk about is Brain Juice. And this one is number 12. And this is one I remember not liking when I was a kid. I don't really remember the exact details. I couldn't tell you what it was about it. But this is one that I don't think I liked at all when I was younger. It's one I didn't remember. And when I reread this, I was very pleasantly surprised. This book is awesome. This is one of the kind of hidden gems in the Goosebumps franchise. And I even remember hearing or reading somewhere that R.L. Stine himself has said that he feels like this is more of a underappreciated Goosebumps book. One that's just kind of doesn't really get the recognition it deserves. And it's one that he really likes, one of his personal favorites. Something along those lines. I don't remember the exact quote or where it was that I heard or read that. But yeah, Brain Juice. This book is awesome, honestly. It's got some great humor in it. It's kind of intense at times. It's got a lot of thematic content in it, in terms of like just having some deeper themes, some emotion to it. The characters are both pretty good. And it's just, yeah, this is a really great Goosebumps book, honestly. And it's one that, even still to this day, I feel like doesn't get talked about all that much. Eventually, when I read through the entire Goosebumps franchise, which will probably still be a little while before that happens, This one is probably going to be like in my top list somewhere. Eventually, I'm going to do some kind of like top 20 or top 30 favorite Goosebumps books of all time across the entire franchise. This one is definitely going to be in there. I'm going to tell you that right now. I don't think it'll place like super high up, like in the top 10, but maybe like within the top 20. This book will make an appearance somewhere on that list. This is a really underrated Goosebumps book, in my opinion. And again, for whatever reason, it's one that's just, I didn't think anything of it when I read it when I was, 12 or 13 or however old I was when I first read this. So yeah, it's Brain Juice. Okay, those are pretty much all of the main books I wanted to talk about. And yeah, I don't know. I just thought I'd do something a little bit different, a discussion type of video. Um, some Goosebumps books, my opinions have changed on them quite a bit over time. I feel like the majority of them, my thoughts on them are still pretty similar to what they were when I was younger. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have for today, guys. I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. What are some Goosebumps books that, or name one? What's one Goosebumps book that you absolutely loved when you were a kid and you don't really care for it as much now? And what's one Goosebumps book that maybe you hated or just kind of disliked and now you really like it or appreciate it a lot more? I'm just kind of curious to hear your guys' thoughts or what your opinions are on that for those of you that grew up with this series. So yeah, that's all I have for today, guys. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.